Johnny Arnett destroying the myth that Michael Jordan dominated a weak era. Let's do it. Reactors, welcome back to the channel, the Nuclear Reactor, the reaction channel where all the reactions go nuclear. So, before we get into this video, if y'all are a sports fan, go over to my sports channel, Ring Culture. Y'all will really love it over there. But back over here at Nuclear Reactor, y'all know I believe every action deserves a reaction. And we are very, very reactionary over here. Before we start this video, though, I would love you guys to like and comment down below, subscribe, and hit the bell notification so y'all can be notified for every time I upload. Today, we're going to be getting into Johnny Arnett video, destroying the myth that Michael Jordan destroyed a weak era, which is nonsense. We all know that this all started to happen when LeBron Ball Boy started to say Jordan played against plumbers, which was insanely not true. So we're going to see what Johnny Arnett has to say about this weak era narrative that is absolute nonsense. So let's react, shall we?
It's a narrative we've heard over and over again, often from people who want to diminish Jordan's legacy. The claim is that Michael Jordan dominated a weak era. He didn't start winning until Magic got HIV, until Bird retired because of back problems, and until the Pistons run was done. People assume that because Jordan couldn't win in the 80s, but then won in the 90s, that it's because the competition weakened. But that's an opinion that's severely lacking context. When Jordan was losing in the 80s, Michael was performing at an MVP level, but Scottie Pippen hadn't developed into a co-star until about 1990. Up until that point, Jordan was a lone all-star with a collection of role players going up against the super teams of the 80s. As good as Jordan was, alone he wasn't enough to take down a collection of all-stars like Larry Bird, Kevin McHale, and Robert Parrish, or a Pistons team with Isaiah Thomas, Joe Dumars, Bill Laimbeer, and Dennis Rodman. It takes a team to win in the NBA, and once Scottie Pippen developed into a co-star, the Bulls never looked back. There's also the narrative that when the Bulls finally broke through and beat the Pistons in 1991, it was because the Pistons had become old.
Yeah, they wasn't old. That's a myth. That is a lie.
91, it was because the Pistons had become old and the Bulls were younger. This is a bogus narrative that does nothing but discredit the Bulls' greatness. The Pistons' best player, Isaiah Thomas, was only 29 years old. Joe Dumars was 27 years old, Mark Aguirre was 31, Bill Laimbeer was 33, and Dennis Rodman was 29. Most of their best players were in the prime age of their careers, yet the Bulls were too much for them. At that point, we had seen the Bulls and Pistons face each other in the playoffs 4 years in a row. So although the matchup between the Bulls and Pistons was getting old, the Pistons certainly were not.
Exactly.
The Bulls didn't start winning because the talent around the league had weakened. They won because a prime Jordan got some much-needed help that the other stars like Thomas and Bird had been enjoying throughout the 1980s.
Exactly.
This weak era narrative doesn't just stem from Jordan's failures in the 80s, but it also comes from people discrediting the teams he faced in the finals throughout the 90s. So with that being said, let's break it down year by year, looking at...
It seems like he's only going to do his finals opponents, but the East was incredibly strong back then, too. So some of Michael Jordan Eastern Conference opponents were the same as, if not stronger than his finals opponents, even though his finals opponents was absurd. But the East was ridiculous back then. So this era wasn't weak by any stretch of the imagination.
So with that being said, let's break it down year by year, looking at each team Jordan faced in the NBA Finals.
Yeah, the finals.
The 1991 LA Lakers. The 91 Lakers finished the year with the third best record in the Western Conference with a 58-24 record. They were led by a still elite Magic Johnson, who even at 32 years old, still put up his usual 20 points and 12 assists per game.
Yep.
James Worthy was his usual running mate, who was averaging 21 points per game over the course of the year.
Yeah.
There was also quality supporting players like Byron Scott, Vlade Divac, and Sam Perkins.
Yep.
With all of that being said, this was not the same Lakers team of the 1980s. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar had recently retired, and both James Worthy and Byron Scott suffered injuries in Game 4 of the series versus the Bulls. Magic Johnson...
They suffered injuries in Game 4. They was already getting shellacked, though, by Game 4. And they was already down. When Game 4 came along, it was down 2-1. And they won the first game. But yeah, James Worthy was a superstar. And Byron Scott was a beast himself. Yeah, but after Game 4, if you get two of those guys injured, it's pretty much over. Also, remember, Magic Johnson was the runner-up for the MVP this season, so he was still balling.
In Game 4 of the series versus the Bulls. Magic Johnson simply didn't have enough support to make the series interesting for Jordan and the Bulls, and the Bulls won the championship comfortably in only 5 games. In my opinion, this was the easiest opposition Jordan ever faced in the NBA Finals. The 1992 Portland Trail Blazers. The 92 Blazers finished the regular season with a 57-25 record, which was the best record in the Western Conference.
They was tough.
They were coached by Rick Adelman, who was a respected coach around the league and an annual Coach of the Year candidate. Adelman won nearly 60% of his games over his career and regularly coached teams into being elite squads defensively. This Portland team was no exception, as they were ranked the third best team in the league defensively that year. They were obviously led by Clyde Drexler, who was in the prime of his career, averaging 25 points, 7 boards, and 7 assists. Clyde was the second best shooting guard in the league behind Jordan. Behind their superstar in Clyde, they had plenty of depth to back him up. Clyde's co-star was the point guard Terry Porter, who averaged nearly 20 points per game and orchestrated the team's elite offense.
Terry Porter was a beast.
Terry was also one of the most lethal and efficient three-point shooters in the game, which helped spread the floor for the Blazers.
That Blazers team was lethal back then. And Drexler was, to me, not far away from being as good as Michael Jordan. He's underrated now in the history, but Drexler was a monster.
Point shooters in the game, which helped spread the floor for the Blazers. At small forward, they had the 29-year-old Jerome Kersey, who just 2 years prior was averaging 20 points per game of his own. They also had Buck Williams at power forward, who was a walking double-double. He was the Rookie of the Year his first year in the league, and Buck was also one of the best defenders in the league at his position. Buck made 4 all-defense teams and was a 3-time NBA All-Star.
That team was
On top of all of that, they had other quality and veteran players with experience, like the scrappy Danny Ainge, Clifford Robertson, and Kevin Duckworth, and each of those guys had made All-Star appearances in their careers. The Deep Blazers had a total of 6 players who averaged double-digit scoring that year, compared to the Bulls, who only had 3 players, Jordan, Pippen, and Horace Grant.
Wow.
So I think you get the point. This Blazers squad was absolutely loaded with talent, and although many of the names on that team have since been forgotten, it would have been absolutely ludicrous in 1992 if you had said their team was weak.
Right.
The 1993 Phoenix Suns. The 93 Suns had finished the NBA season with a 62-20 record, which was the best record in the entire NBA. Not only did they have the best record in the league, and the league's top-rated offense, but they also had the league MVP. Charles Barkley was one of the greatest players in NBA history, who was just 29 years old and coming off of a season where he averaged 25 points, 12 rebounds, and 5 assists. Helping Barkley was an elite 26-year-old in NBA history, who was just 29 years old and coming off of a season where he averaged 25 points, 12 rebounds, and 5 assists. Helping Barkley was an elite 26-year-old point guard Kevin Johnson, who was a 3-time All-Star and had been on 5 All-NBA teams. Kevin Johnson, the energy and effort behind the Suns' season, and had averaged 18 points and 9 assists that year. On this year's Suns was also the recently acquired Danny Ainge, who crossed paths with Jordan a lot in the playoffs.
He definitely did.
They also had Dan Marley, who was one of the best wing defenders in the NBA at this time, and was also an elite three-point shooter who was chipping in 17 points per game that season.
Marley was
Add
nice.
in quality veteran scorers like Tom Chambers and Cedric Ceballos, and what you have is one of the greatest...
That 1993 Suns team, I don't know how they didn't make it back to the finals the next season, because that team was ridiculous.
Tom Chambers and Cedric Ceballos, and what you have is one of the greatest teams ever to fail to win a championship.
Yep.
I'm telling you guys, this Phoenix team was incredible. They had absolutely everything, but it just wasn't meant to be. The Bulls were clicking at the right time, and Jordan had arguably the greatest final series of any player ever, as he averaged an incredible 41 points, 8.5 rebounds, and 6.3 assists over a hard-fought 6-game series.
Crazy.
The 1996 Seattle Supersonics. This Sonics team was another nasty one.
Yes.
The 96 Sonics finished their season with a 64-18 record, which was the best record in the Western Conference, but was still overshadowed by the Bulls' 72-10 record. They were coached by a Coach of the Year winner, George Karl, and with the exception of Jordan's Bulls, the Sonics had the best defense in the league that season. This Sonics group didn't have a single player who averaged over 20 points per game that season, but they were extremely gritty and well-balanced.
Yes.
They had their prime superstar tandem of Gary Payton and Shawn Kemp. Kemp averaged nearly 20 points and 11 boards, and was known for his ferocity and aggression around the rim. Payton was also averaging almost 20 points, was an excellent facilitator, and was that season's steals champion and Defensive Player of the Year.
He was Defensive Player of the
Then
Year.
you had Hersey Hawkins, who was a quality scorer and spark for the Sonics, Detlef Schrempf, a 6'9 small forward who was a 2-time Sixth Man of the Year winner who was averaging 17 points per game that season. These are the type of guys that people don't remember, but who are the difference makers in playoff basketball.
People don't remember the other All-Stars when they don't win championships. Like, if they wasn't like a marquee name All-Star, you're not going to remember them, but they were great players in their prime. And people like Detlef Schrempf, who was an amazingly great player, you're not going to remember a guy like that if he never really won a championship. Yeah, there's a lot of players like that. Even this era. And 10 years from now, there's going to be players in this era you're not going to remember. Paul George might be one of them if he doesn't win a championship.
People don't
That's
remember,
just an example,
but who are the
Paul George.
difference makers in playoff
I'm not
basketball.
like, you know.
This Sonics team was definitely championship worthy. With their collection of talent and their gritty defensive identity, they really remind me of the 2003-2004 Detroit Pistons, who used their team effort to take down the super team Lakers. As worthy as the Sonics team was, no one was beating Jordan and the 72-10 Bulls that season. The 1997 Utah Jazz. The 97 Jazz finished the regular season with a 64-18 record, which was the best record in all of the Western Conference. The Jazz were the second best offense in the league that season, behind Jordan's Bulls, and they were also a top 10 defensive team. If you exclude Magic Johnson and Tim Duncan, then the 97 Jazz had arguably the greatest power forward ever and the greatest point guard ever in their starting five.
Yeah, obviously now, I think the second greatest point guard now is Curry, but back then, and also I didn't think that Stockton was the second greatest point guard back then. I thought it was Isaiah Thomas. I had Stockton fourth as greatest point guard. But I get what he means, though.
Ever and the greatest point guard ever in their starting five. Stockton and Malone were a dynamic, championship-worthy tandem on both the offensive end and the defensive end. Even beyond Stockton and Malone, the Jazz had plenty of depth that's been forgotten over the years.
They do.
Like Jeff Hornacek, who was a consistent and reliable third option for the Jazz, who was one of the best three-point shooters in the league.
Yes, he was.
You know this Jazz team was legit by simply considering who they had to beat just to get to the finals. In the Western Conference Finals, the Jazz defeated the Houston Rockets in 6 games. A Rockets super team stacked with Hakeem Olajuwon.
That team, they did beat them, but that wasn't the same Rockets team because Olajuwon was out of his prime. Then he was still above average because I believe superstars that out of their prime a little bit are still above average, and Barkley was a little bit out of his prime. Drexler probably was the only one that may have been still going strong, but still to get that far with these three guys shows you just how good they were.
Rockets super team stacked with Hakeem Olajuwon, Charles Barkley, and Clyde Drexler leading the way. This Jazz team earned their stripes, but the Bulls handled them comfortably in 6 games. The 1998 Utah Jazz. The 98 Jazz had relatively the same strong roster and finished the regular season with the best offense in the league and a 62-20 record. The most significant thing that changed since the previous season was that the Bulls had weakened. Jordan was 35 years old, Rodman was 37 years old, and Pippen was 32 and had missed nearly half of the season due to his laboring back problems. Yet despite all of those disadvantages, Jordan still led the Bulls to win in 6 games over the Jazz for their 2nd straight season. In that finals series, Jordan quite literally carried the Bulls as he averaged 33.5 points of the Bulls' 88 points per game that series.
Crazy.
Now that I've recapped each...
In that Game 6, he scored more than half of the Bulls' points. He scored 45 points in Game 6. And Pippen was clearly hobbled by a back injury. You can actually watch the entire game here on YouTube. It was an incredible performance by Michael Jordan that night. It was one of the greatest championship games I've ever seen in my life. Jordan was insane.
Points per game that series. In that finals series, Jordan quite literally carried the Bulls as he averaged 33.5 points of the Bulls' 88 points per game that series. Now that I've recapped each finals team Jordan faced in the 90s, I want to make my closing point about generational talent. It's easy for the casual NBA fan to look at Jordan's competition of the 90s and criticize it because people simply don't remember the talent, or weren't even watching at the time, so they don't truly know how talented those teams were.
Exactly.
Think of the impact players in today's game, like Andre Iguodala, Steven Adams, Lou Williams, and Eric Gordon. These are just a few examples of talented players who are often the difference in wins and losses for their teams. But in a few decades, no one will be talking about these guys the same way no one talks about guys like Terry Porter, Dan Marley, Detlef Schrempf, and Jeff Hornacek. At a certain point, people won't remember the overall talent of teams, and it becomes just about the stars. The young casuals will say things like, "So Jordan and Pippen beat Barkley in the finals, big deal. What else did Barkley have?" A lot, actually. Heck, sometimes it's not even the solid role players who get forgotten, but sometimes it's even the star players themselves. A perfect example of a modern player who could eventually be forgotten is Paul George. Sure, he puts up great numbers, and was even in...
Wow, and Paul George is one of my favorite players, but yes, his game is so beautiful that that you could forget Paul George if he doesn't win a championship.
Forgotten is Paul George. Sure, he puts up great numbers, and was even an MVP candidate for a while this year, but in 2 to 3 decades, people won't be talking about this guy.
Nope.
How do I know this? Because I've already seen it with guys like Adrian Dantley, Sidney Moncrief, Clyde Drexler, and Alex English. These were guys who averaged 25 to 30 points per game and carried their franchises year in and year out. But into the future, people generally don't talk about the greats who didn't win championships. So again, with that in mind, it's easy to see why people diminish Jordan's competition in the 90s, because when Jordan was playing in the 90s, he was the only one winning. And those are the ones we remember. No matter how you try and spin it, the reality is that Michael Jordan led a Bulls team that dominated an era of legitimate and fierce competition that many people just simply don't remember or just never knew. Thanks for watching my video, guys. Let me know in the comment section how you grade Michael Jordan's competition in the NBA Finals. Make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.
Yeah, Johnny Arnett knows what he's talking about. He's absolutely right about everything he said. There's going to be guys in this era that we watch and be like, yo, this dude is a monster. And it has been monsters for seasons. 10 years from now, nobody's going to be talking about them dudes. Even the star players. Like, I picked Paul George because Paul George is like one of my favorite, if not my favorite player in the league. But I am a realist about my favorite players, that Paul George, he, you know, if he doesn't win the championship, no one's going to really remember him. You know, it's going to be like that for not just him. Damian Lillard, players like that, these ultra great players. Nobody's going to be talking about them. Even Russell Westbrook, and I love Russ. That's just the nature of it. If you are not a household name that won a championship, it's going to be hard pressed for a lot of people to remember who you are. Therefore, allowing them to downplay how great you were. That's just the reality of it. But anyway, let me know what y'all think about Jordan era down below. And did Arnett miss any great players that was in Jordan era? Like I told y'all, I believe the Eastern Conference was loaded. The whole league was loaded. But Jordan had to go through some really hellish Eastern Conference teams just to get to the finals. If I ever find a video on someone doing just his Eastern Conference competition, I'm going to react to it. But let me know down below what y'all think. Reactors, as always, a pleasure. All minds, react.